embracing midlifeness. There's a lot here, and today we dive into some of it. Do you know the quote by Maya Angelou? People will forget what you said, what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Shelby Rayner, my guest today, is one of those people who you never forget the way you feel when you're around her. I practiced yoga side by side with her and took her classes for years, was part of an incredible yoga studio community that she built. And whenever I was in the studio, I felt seen, loved, and if she was leading the class, you were going to bring your best because that's what she brought out of you. Today, she generously takes us into her heart and mind as she navigates some of the biggest changes in her life. What I loved about this conversation is that she's still in the midst of moving through and processing all the change. How many times do we find ourselves wondering, working it out, letting go, and creating what's next all at the same time? Pull up a chair or join us wherever you are as we explore life, the complexity, the grappling, and the beauty. I'm Carla Reeves, and this is Differently, the Lifepreneur podcast. I'm a hyperachiever turned lifepreneur, and after a decade of coaching ambitious leaders, I'm convinced we are far closer than we realize to what we deeply desire, and it's a willingness to do differently that can change everything. This podcast is for the everyday leader ambitious for a rich, out-of-the-box life. This is your weekly nudge and reminder to take a risk to build a life that is uniquely bold, authentic, and in alignment with your deepest values. Hi, Shelby. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited you're here.
Oh my gosh. I am so delighted and very flattered that you've invited me. Thank you so much.
So Shelby and I, for you listening, Shelby and I met, Shelby, many years ago? I don't even know how many years ago it was.
Well, I don't either, but I know it's been a long time because didn't you start coming to the studio when we were back in the riverbed on Indian School? Yeah. So yeah, it's gotta be, at least, 12 years or so, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yes. So
Off and
Shelby
on.
was the owner of a Bikram yoga studio. And I had a friend who recommended going there, and I met Shelby and her husband, and I started doing Bikram yoga, and then my husband started doing it, and we moved with them to a new studio. And gosh, we just had a lot of interaction through that, and even met outside of that on occasion. And Shelby, you're just somebody that I just have so much respect for. And, there are not many people and businesses that I have interacted with that did it in the way that you did. And the integrity and impeccability that you ran that studio with, and your presence in that place was just an inspiration. And that practice, the way that practice has impacted our life, and I know yours, and I can't wait to hear about that. And so I am just so grateful and honored to have you and share you with people listening. So I can't wait to dive in. So
thank you. That was so kind, especially coming from you. Thank you. Thank you.
Give us a snapshot, kind of let people know of like a snapshot of kind of where you are today in your life and the chapter you're in.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So when you reached out to me, I think I shared with you, it's been a very, big year for me as far as change. I sold my business, which was one of the biggest, and hardest decisions I've made. So I sold my business in March, that I co-owned with my husband, and I turned 50, which was huge. My oldest daughter graduated from high school, and we're sending her off to college in the fall. And, yeah, I find myself retired and, I've worked since I was 15 years old. So this is a very different, life for me right now. And I'm loving it so much, but it's taken me several months to kind of settle into this new lifestyle and get comfortable with it. But
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much there. So I want to go back because I want you to tell the story, like just you saying like that was the biggest and hardest decision that you had to make. Kind of walk us through a little bit of that.
yeah, well, okay. So my husband and I opened the studio in 2007. So 15 years, we owned it. And in 2019, actually, I'll say at the very beginning of 2020, we brought someone on board, that we were hoping we could kind of put into a management position, so that I didn't have to be so involved in the minutia of the day-to-day operations, and was really excited about that. And then COVID hit. So I say this because I was at a place where I was ready to step back a little bit, and COVID hit, and that was tough. We lost over half of our membership base in less than a month. And I can't really describe that experience of being that far into your business and have it be, I don't know, it was just nuts. We had to close down. It was very, very difficult. And so that's when things started to change for me. Even when we were allowed to reopen, we had so many restrictions that we reopened under. And this was when COVID was new and there was so much unknown. And I felt responsible for that community and my staff and trying to keep everyone safe. And, it just kind of started to be not fun anymore. And I really was wondering why I was doing it. Anyways, things kind of started getting back to normal, but I never felt like I was able to get myself back to normal. And, before we started this podcast, we were kind of catching up, and I had already been going through some big life changes, just some personal things that were making me kind of reevaluate some things. And, so anyways, let's see, we're in 2022. I feel like we're in this weird time warp ever since COVID.
It is a time warp. It is
right?
a time warp.
Is it pre-COVID, after COVID? We're still in COVID. Yeah, so it was late last year, around August, September. I had been talking to some friends, some very close friends, and kind of sharing with them how I was feeling, and oh my gosh, maybe it's time for me to sell, and back and forth. And I really thought a long time about it. And it was such a hard decision for me to make because my ego was so wrapped up in being a business owner, owning that studio. I just really was super identified with it. And I was terrified. Like, if I didn't have that anymore, who was I? What value did I bring to the table? It was really, really scary. And, not to drag this out, but the bottom line was, it was really when I really sat down and looked at myself in the studio and realized that I wasn't able to give my full heart to that place anymore. I love that community so much, that I just wanted the best for them. And I knew I wasn't the person that was going to be able to do that anymore. And so fortunately, we met with a business broker and we started that process, and, John and I talked about it, and our ideal situation would be if another, kind of our sister studio, which is the Foundry, who ended up buying it. That was our dream. Like, if those guys would be interested in buying the studio, it would be amazing, because then, it wouldn't be like going from Bikram yoga and Inferno hot Pilates to, I don't know, indoor boxing or something totally different. So I realized that,
Right.
the classes and the vibe could be the same. And so we're just really fortunate the way it all worked out, but it was not an easy decision for me to come to.
Wow. And so
Did
how
I
long
answer
has
that
it been
question?
since you did? Yeah, because I think it's like the part that's so interesting to me is like the grappling, right? The grappling we do as humans when you reach those different stages in your life where something starts to rub and there's friction and so or something like you said doesn't feel the same as it once did. And I think those are moments that we all go through, whether it's selling a business or making other changes in our life. There's that inner grappling that happens. And I think it's so important. It's so important to listen and pay attention to that and kind of dig into that. And like you did, get in close community with people and talk about it and explore it to see what it is. And and that's just to me, that's you, Shelby, and your essence, like your ability to step back and go, what's best for this community and the what we've created here, because oh my gosh, I was part of that community and the care of your community was so incredibly beautiful. And anybody there, it was like a family. It was like a family. And that's how you created it. And so I'm not surprised that was a huge piece in your decision making too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I mean, it was a big one. And it took me, so we sold the business in March of this year. And I still sometimes am stunned that I was able to make that decision and that I did it, because I knew one day we would sell it, but man, I never thought it would come as soon as it did. And, now that I can kind of step back and look at it, I'm just so proud of myself for having the courage to do that, because it was huge. It was a big, big one.
It was
Yeah.
huge. And yeah. So we were talking before we hit record, like you said, and we were talking about Shelby and I both lost our parents very close together, like in the same 2 years. And you were talking about how that was pivotal too. Like, gosh, talk about a ton of change in a short period of time where that caused you to do some reflection too. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, this is a time in our lives where we've just, especially women, I think we have so much on our plates. And we've got, teenage kids and aging parents that now need our help. And we're working and, doing all the things. And so when my parents got sick, my dad lived in Oregon. So my brother was the one that was kind of taking care and overseeing his care, but my mom was here. And, it was hard. It was, we moved her, let's see, 1, 2, 3 times, from Flagstaff down to Phoenix, close to our home. And then when she couldn't live by herself anymore, into an assisted living place. And it was just kind of all hands on deck for a while. And, I felt really torn because I still had a business to run, and my mom needed help. And, it was just a very, very stressful time. And, I remember thinking to myself when I was trying to be with my mom, or something would come up with my mom and I'd be scheduled to teach a class and trying to get my class covered or whatever it is. And just thinking like, I have no business working right now. It also just really was like, I think once my parents passed, it also, and I mentioned this earlier when we were speaking, it also just really kind of makes you confront your own mortality. And, we don't have limitless time here, and we don't know when our last day will be. And how do I want to live from this point forward? What do I value most? And am I living in accordance to those values? And I don't know that I am yet, but I'm getting closer. So
Love that.
losing my parents was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me too, I mean, I think it is, turning 50, losing your parents, going through these major changes. And for me too, it is like after losing my parents, you do reevaluate your life and how you're living your life and what you want your life to be about. I know for me, watching my parents' world get smaller and smaller and smaller, you just see like how so much stuff doesn't matter. And what really matters is the people, right? And the relationships. Like
Yeah.
that's it. At the end of life, that was all they had. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and it just does make you reevaluate, like, what am I doing with my life? And am I spending the time in the way that I want to? And like you said, aligned with your values. And it is, I think just turning 50 is that, and then losing parents is that, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's, you know, gosh, I mean, we could have a whole session on just, um, that whole process of taking care of aging parents and all that goes into that. And then losing them, the grief and the relief, it's, it's a big one. And I even remember talking to some friends about how there is even some beauty in that, because it's natural. If we're lucky, it's natural that we're going to lose our parents, meaning we're lucky enough to still be here, right? Living. And, we all know death is a part of life. And, there was some beauty in going through that with my parents, seeing that whole process. It's like a rite of passage. I don't know. Does that sound
I
crazy? Did you?
completely, no, it doesn't sound crazy at all. I would actually love to have you back and talk about that because I've been wanting to find someone to talk about that with. I think there is so much beauty. I feel like it was such an honor to actually be there and witness what I did. The fear I had of death diminished after, like there was just so much. So I would love to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a big one.
well, and the other change that you're navigating is your kids, right? Like your daughter's getting ready to go to college. And so that's
Yes.
a
Uh,
whole nother major transition, Shelby.
oh my gosh. And just like, watching, well, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You remember when your kids were little and you just felt exhausted all the time. And everyone older would tell you, oh my gosh, it goes by so fast. Enjoy these years. It goes by so fast. And holy cow, they were not kidding. And I've become one of those people now that looks to these younger ones with little kids like, oh my God, enjoy it now because everyone's told me this and it's so true. But honestly, I feel like even just 3 or 4 years ago, my kids were so different than they are now. Like when you think about like how much, not just physical growth, but like emotional and mental growth and changes kids go through from like, you know, 12 to 18. It's so fast and it's so much. Like no wonder those years are so hard for kids. Um, and yeah, I can't believe
It's
it.
mind blowing what
Yep.
happens in those years. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm living with adults basically and, adults that still put their dishes in the sink, but that forget to put their dishes in the dishwasher. Um, yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And also this is another whole podcast we could talk about. Like, when you have kids, you have these ideas of who they will be, right? How you'll raise them and who they'll be and what they're going to like and all these things. And then they become teenagers and it's just becomes so clear that they are such their own persons, and that's just kind of, I'm just amazed by that. And that's been a big lesson for me too, to kind of, let go of trying to control everything and everyone around me. But yeah.
Yeah. When Tom left for the Navy, that first year was really, really hard for me. And, I remember like there was a day where I was having a very hard time, and I just I got on Google and I'm like searching for a book, like I need a book. I need something to like give me some different ideas or inspiration. And I came across this book called Release My Grip. And the front of the book had like a bird's nest with a feather. And like, I just started weeping when I saw the cover of the book, and I immediately ordered it. And that book has helped me so much. One of the things that I remember that she said was, look through the, or how she said it so beautifully, but it was like, look through your children's eyes and into their future instead of looking through the rearview mirror of your life, right?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I'm in the rearview mirror of my life, I get weepy and sorrowful and sad. But if I look through the lens of their life, I get excited and invigorated, right? Like it's so exciting what's ahead for them.
Yes.
And
Wow. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really hard for you when your son, your oldest, when he left, it was hard, really hard.
It was really hard. I mean, just like you were saying, these kids that become their own people and with their own ideas, Tom, I mean, I should have known Shelby. When I look back, there are signs all along that he would go in the military. And he was dressed in camo with a gun on his hip from the time he was 3.
Oh my gosh.
But he wasn't really talking about it, as he got into like junior, senior year. And I literally came home one day and he said, Mom, I'm meeting with a recruiter tomorrow. And I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to just freak out, but I just like calmed down and sat down next to him and said, tell me why, like what's going on? Cause this was the first he had really, he had said recruiters were coming to the school and, like that, but it wasn't anything serious. And so I was so shocked. And, he showed me a video of the Navy and I started crying just watching. I just like, of course this is what you're going to do. Like it made so much sense. Right. But it wasn't my idea of what he would do.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I was just going to say, and realizing that he, was old enough to, make those kinds of decisions, and what are you going to do? My goodness.
That's right. I had to get on board.
Yeah.
And, and his leaving was, even though we had COVID, that was a blessing of COVID, was we had a number of months with him before he left where we were, just us hanging out and walking and just spending a ton of quality time together. But yeah, that empty room in the house was pretty hard for a long time. And now it's my office. I hang out in Tom's room.
Oh my gosh. Cool. Yeah. How funny. I know there are some pros, right? I know I vacillate between like getting excited where, John and I can just go do all the fun things now. And like, oh my God, I can't believe it's already over. Like I need a do-over. Went by too fast.
Right.
Yeah. That's what grandkids are for, I guess.
Yes. Right. Someone recently told me that her husband was telling her, this is temporary because then your house is going to fill up again. And so that's kind of how we're approaching this, is like this next series of years that we get to kind of create, like we have some freedom to travel and do things together, and we still like each other a lot. And
oh, that's so great. Yes.
fun to think about all those things too. So tell me what that's looking like in your world.
Yes. Well, you just used my word, which is freedom. I remember, through the years at the studio, I had taken like a mindset course and you had come in and did like a goal setting course. And it was, a lot about getting to your why and, visualizing, what you wanted as though it was already, a reality.
Yeah.
And my word was so often it was freedom. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom. And I'm finally at a point that I feel like I have it now. I kind of just realized this the other day, like now that I don't have any business that I'm responsible for and my kids are, at an age where we're lucky if we all get to sit down and have dinner, all four of us together. I feel like one of the kids is always gone, but, to have freedom to start doing fun stuff that I couldn't do before. So my husband and I just got back from Spain. We kind of took this spontaneous trip, just the two of us to Spain and, had the best time and just really looking forward to doing more of that. I hiked the Grand Canyon. I did that rim to rim in a day, this past May, which was a big deal for me. And, just looking forward to more like new experiences, and really taking advantage of these years between, now and when I get to a point where, it's not as easy to get around, or hopefully that point won't come, but yeah.
You're a long ways from that.
Yeah, hopefully. Knock on wood. Yes.
Yes, right. So I want to dive in there for a little bit we were talking before about, because I see you as somebody who very much was like a high or hyper achiever like myself for a lot of years of your life. Would you agree with that?
100%. And possibly to a detriment. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm curious for you because I took this last month to kind of strip away all the extra busyness I was doing as kind of like another level of just freeing myself from this sort of addiction to productivity and creativity and busyness, right?
Yes.
And there was a lot of discomfort in the space. And so I'm curious for you, like, have you gone through periods of time of discomfort in the freedom or space that you have in your life now?
Yes. And I'm really, so one of the things I realized was in constantly trying to achieve is that I would achieve it. And then by the time I had achieved it, I was already moving the bar. Like there was no celebration or recognition of what I achieved. I was already on to the next thing. And so there was no, I don't know, it just was like never ending. And what was the purpose? I'm not even sure what the purpose was other than to be busy. And then I started realizing, wow, I mentioned earlier that I felt like my ego was really wrapped up in owning a business, working, that was so much of how I identified myself was, being a working mom, being a professional, owning and running a business. And if I don't do that, what am I going to do? And that was super scary. Like I can't not work. And then I started realizing there's, the purpose of, and this is just, my thoughts. So take that with a grain of salt, but our time here, it can't be about what what we achieve and how much we get done on our to-do list. Do you know what I mean? That's not why I'm here. And I don't want to squander what I have left with, being busy and getting things done. It's hard for me to even articulate because I don't know that I completely understand it yet. But when you have days where you don't feel like doing anything, and so maybe you don't do very much that day. And then if I have a day like that, I'll kind of feel bad later. Like, God, I was such a loser today. I didn't do anything. I think all of that busyness and that completing the tasks is a distraction from what I'm really here to learn about this experience here in this life with the people I'm surrounded by. It's got to be more than crossing off things on my to-do list, or making more money, or creating and seeing through big projects. Not that those things aren't rewarding and wonderful, but I feel like I have felt like I'm missing the point. And man, I better figure it out before it's too late. Does that make sense at all?
It makes 100% sense. And I think like when you said, the busyness and the doing, distraction and I think there are seasons of our life, right, where those things are maybe important or play a larger role. But I think the season you and I are in, for sure, for me, I'm going through the same thing of like really questioning some of those things, because I'm more invested in doing more living, in this season of my life than I ever have. And I also, when you said, that it's a distraction, stripping away all of this stuff over the last month has actually allowed me to be more present in my life. And it's made me realize like how much the busyness just squanders and robs like the moments. And I've just, it's like I've been able to just be more thoughtful, whether it's just responding to a text or like taking a phone call or calling a friend or noticing, the bird in the tree or like just
totally
the simplest
yes.
of things, right?
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
All the achieving, you think you're doing something to get somewhere better, but the better actually is right here. And I,
yeah, no, you're totally right. Or, and maybe it's not, whether it's better or not, it's like, it's where life is, right? It's where life is. It's not in the future. It's not in the planning for, in the doing for, I mean, it's big, heavy stuff. And by no means do I have it figured out at all. And as much as I'd like to tell you now that I'm retired, I'm, meditating every day and have found all this, newfound insight. I haven't, but I just know that I want to do it differently. And so starting small, like you had said, just making more time for texting a friend, that's been big for me, is just putting more time into my relationships. And, that's been really fun for me, super fulfilling. And, I just feel incredibly grateful for where I am right now. I feel very fortunate that I'm in a position right now that I don't have to work. I realize not everyone, is in that same situation. So I feel incredibly blessed that I have this time to kind of reflect and, pump the brakes and just let things settle. Because people keep asking me, well, what's next? What are you going to do now? And for the first time in my life, it's like, I don't know. And I am getting comfortable with that. I'm getting comfortable with not knowing. And that's huge for me because I've never been like that.
I love that, Shelby. And I love that you're in process, right? Like I actually like that there's nothing, like it's not all figured out, because many times in our life do we find ourselves like in this kind of space with whatever it is and whatever stage of life we're in, where we don't have it all figured out, and it might feel a little murky or messy or unclear, and And it's like, how do we walk ourselves kind of through that time, And so I'm curious, are you doing yoga still? Is that still a big part of your life?
It isn't, which is as crazy as anything. And so one of the things I've learned is never say always. You know how they say never say never? Mine is never say always.
Yes.
I honestly thought I would forever practice Bikram yoga. And I have not taken a Bikram yoga class in months. It's probably been, I don't know, maybe since February. So long, long time. I have actually fallen in love with weight training. So I'm going to a gym now and, which is,
Wow.
yeah. And I'm really enjoying it. After so many years of teaching group fitness, and being like, part of a community, I'm finding it really nice to go somewhere where no one knows who I am. And it's a very, I'm just there by myself with my headphones on, and it's very solitary, and I really enjoy it. So, I would like to think that I will go back to the hot room someday, but I'm not feeling a need to do it anytime soon.
I get that. I think there was a time where I said I would always do that. And Quentin and I still talk about maybe someday going back, if we lived close to a studio or something like that. Like it was, oh my gosh, it was such a gift in my life. And I feel like I don't know, I feel like I still live by some of the principles of it, right? Like it just taught me a lot about how equipped our bodies are to heal themselves and just so many things. But,
so many things. That. Yes. No, I was just going to say one of the great things about Bikram yoga is it just really teaches you to kind of listen to your body. You get to know your body really well. And, it certainly helped me fall in love with movement. And that's something that has not left me. So it teaches you discipline and focus and all of those things. And those are things that I still use even at the gym today. So yeah, grateful for that practice. And like I said, one day I may get back there. But I'm not in a hurry right now. I'm really enjoying working out and being done with the workout. My hair is still dry.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
And the time. I'm kind of grateful for the time that I have from what I used to call
totally.
it like the 3-hour tour.
Honestly, it was a huge time commitment. Yeah.
It was.
Yes.
But I kind of love that you're not doing it, Shelby. Like, I think that feels like a very natural, like kind of unwinding from that chapter of your life. And that feels really healthy almost.
Yeah. It feels right to me, and I'm trying not to, put judgments on it or anything. Cause, like I said, I totally thought I would do it forever. And it's just so interesting how, we just don't know how things are going to go. And
yeah, I've been kind of playing with this idea of lifepreneurship, calling it lifepreneurship. And I realized that it's kind of what I've been teaching clients over the years, but I never really had a name for it. And it's like, I see it as a way of thinking about life, a way of doing life, and kind of a mindset and philosophy of life. But if you think about it, how an entrepreneur like you approaches business, right? Like this kind of relentless pursuit, in your business, I like to think about it like taking that incredible drive and energy and applying it to building a life that is authentic and aligned with your values, and like putting that energy into all areas of our life instead of just one area of life, which for achievers tend to. Yeah. And so I think, that like, I don't know, that what does that mean to you?
Well, I love that term, and I love that idea of putting as much energy and thought into all aspects of living versus just, your career. It's just getting more comfortable with kind of like what you said before about your son and the book that you read, like letting go a little bit of trying to control and being comfortable with making big changes, creating space for something new. It's scary, but
I think
we don't,
It is scary. And I was going to ask you, and as kind of a way to close, because I think everything you just said kind of brings us to a natural place to close, but is like for people listening that find themselves in the midst of that change or in the midst of uncertainty or in the midst of, embracing something totally new. I was going to ask you, what would you share with them? As you're kind of navigating that too. And I think you just said it, which was, you can help me, but letting go a little bit.
Yeah, letting go and making space for the new. And even though it's unknown, so for example, it's taken me a few months to kind of get comfortable with my new lifestyle. But as we got back from our vacation, I was just telling my husband the other night how grateful I am and how amazing I feel, right now. So there was all this anxiety about like, well, what am I going to do if I'm not working? And, who am I if I'm not working? What value am I bringing to the table if I'm not being productive and creating new things and helping other people and earning an income and all those things? And, I'm at a place now where I've kind of got a nice routine. I'm learning Spanish. I take an online Spanish course 2 or 3 times a week. And that's been something I've wanted to do for such a long time. And I'm absolutely in love with my Spanish class and learning the language. It feels so good on my brain and I'm really fired up on it. We just took a great trip to Spain. My husband and I are looking forward to new adventures. Got a big hike coming up. Moving my daughter to college, just all kinds of fun stuff coming up. And what's nice is I can do it and not worry about, my employees or my community or paying bills or anything like that. I can just be in this new phase and enjoy. And I'm just feel incredibly blessed and grateful. And one of the things that I'm most grateful for is that I am comfortable not knowing what is next for me. I might never work again and that's okay. And yeah, that it's okay that I have this time right now. And that's a big deal for me to be okay with that, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. I absolutely love that. Shelby, I loved this conversation with you. I want to have you back and we can explore those other things that we were talking about. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh my goodness, Carla, it was my absolute pleasure. It was so much fun. And I would love to come back. I would love for us to get together and have coffee or, see each other face to face. That would be so much fun. And thank you again so much.
Oh my gosh, I would love that too. To be continued.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Differently. I hope it stirred your thinking, and I invite you to take one inspired action from something that stood out to you. If you want to hear more conversations like this, hit follow on your favorite podcast app. And if this episode could impact someone you know, please share it and pass it along. Remember, new episodes drop weekly. See you next week.